One of the greatest, if not the greatest, current issue that our young generation faces today is the online world. Not just phones, but everything digital that has shaped the way that we think, live, and we feel. What do I mean by this? Mostly time that's spent on our devices, but including TV, gaming, social media, AI, anything else that occurs in the virtual realm. And today, what we're going to be tackling today in our parent seminar is digital discipleship. Pew Research tells us that 95% of people aged 13 to 18 use social media platforms, and 46% of people aged 13 to 18 admit to being online almost constantly. Common Sense Media found the online average recreational time very recently on what we call the online world, and what we spend daily on today for adolescents is a whopping 8 hours and 39 minutes a day. Don't believe me? Check the stats. But trust me, as I have journeyed with it and I look and our youth share those things with me, it is absolutely true. And to be honest with you, I didn't believe this kinds of hours of media was being spent until I started to ask and observe these realities with our youth today, and I am personally worried. We as parents and caregivers need to understand this, that the online world is not neutral, it is forming us. And if we don't set boundaries, it will not just shape our students in alarming ways, but also us as adults in alarming ways. We know now as 2026 studies are showing that the more screen time spent on students, the more rapid increase in anxiety and depression levels. And that 8 hour and 39 minute statistic, by the way, only 3 hours of that is within school time. 5 or so is within just recreational time, just as an FYI. But before we even had studies like done even this year, there were correlation studies, meaning, hey, we're seeing depression uptick, but we're also seeing social media uptick. So we don't know if those fully line up. But now we actually have confirmation studies, which say we actually know that these phones here are the exact cause to why depression and anxiety levels are spiking. So there's a potential right now, as this is recorded in 2026 in Saskatchewan, for a potential social media ban, which is interesting to me because it's showing that our devices are having such a widespread effect on governments and schools, and they're taking notice. But I want to propose today this, that we need to think about the digital world much beyond social media, but actually with all kinds of technology, gaming, AI, education-based use, everything. I am Gen Z. I grew up with this being adopted, and I'll tell you this, when I was 10 years old, I had my first encounter with cyberbullying. I saw how awful it was, and I saw what it did to people all the way throughout high school. When I was 11, I was exposed to pornography and became addicted all the way throughout middle and high school. When I was 13, I got this new app called Instagram and saw people who I knew putting things on that social media app that were very scary, very vulnerable. And as I started to look into it, I saw people being subtly, and me too, being subtly influenced about what was being said. And as I look back, it is and was very destructive. And I know for me, some of the worst things that I've gotten myself into have been online. At the end of the day, the online world has not made me, William Dmytrow, a better person, and my guess is that is the same for you as well. Now, I want us to get into spaces of very practical application, but to begin today, I want to ground ourselves in God's Word, which may come to your surprise has much more to say on the value of this topic than you may realize. Philippians 4, verse 10 to 12 says this, "For I have learned," Paul writes, "to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret in every situation, whether it is a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little." So what's going on here? Paul's writing the book to Philippians. It's to the church in Philippi 2,000 years ago. And in Roman culture, which Philippi was a significant Roman city, life was about gaining power, entertainment, controlling truth, and getting authority. And in the book of Philippians, they were essentially living in a culture where power was about the rank that you had in your society, your citizenship, your wealth. If you were close to Caesar, you were basically worshipped for your status. You might understand the Colosseum, where people were entertained, numbed with violence, gladiator games happened, executions, blood sport. This was all used to spread propaganda and stop people from questioning authority. And Paul's under house arrest, and he's proclaiming something super countercultural to the day. In the mix, in the world of telling you to be more, get more, do more, Paul gives this line, "I know how to do almost with nothing or with everything." And as followers of Jesus, why is it fine to be plenty with little or plenty with a lot? To be fully content in whatever circumstance. And Paul goes on here to say, "For I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Wow. When we typically hear this, we use this passage to be like, yeah, in God, I can do anything. Like, give me your given sport and I'll put it in my Instagram bio or whatever. But what's really being said in this conversation, in the book to Philippi, is that Christians are not called to attach themselves to finite things that ultimately don't matter, but rather to rely to Jesus on the one who gives us strength. And today, I believe as a Big C church, this is a really important word for us today, that 2,000 years ago, the problems of this world were gaining power, entertainment, and authority, were a relentless stop to never being content. And today, us and our youth are killing themselves with fighting for power, with more followers, money, platforms, celebrity culture, influencers. And instead of a violent entertainment culture, we find ourselves in endless doom scrolling, rage bait content, shock clips, endless algorithms finding hope in AI chatbots and entertainment that may not be violent, but distracting us from meaning and what's really truth and reality. Instead of numbing people with violence, the online world has numbed us with endless stimulation and extreme political polarization to the point that we don't even want to worship God in the same room with people who have different political allegiances. That's where we're at. And instead of a physical propaganda, Roman culture, we're in a Canadian culture where it actually exists all online. It's estimated that our younger generation sees 10,000 advertisements a day thrown at them. And we must wonder, what is that doing to us? And so, with that said, I want to dive into tackling tech habits at home and finding some very helpful applications for us today on how we can apply these things into our own personal lives and what research is telling us what could also be helpful in the lives of a family as well. Now, I want to begin here. Number one, modeling the following steps to healthy tech habits. I think if we're telling our younger generation to have healthier relationships with our devices, but it's not modeled by the adults in the home, nothing will happen. Research is telling us that if we don't treat this as a family approach, nothing will work. And let me just give a caveat here. I am not a parent, so I don't want to pretend that I know all the answers, but what I am going to do today is tell you what research is telling us on what works best. So, the first thing that has worked best is turning grayscale and warm color settings on in the phone settings. The color on our tech is meant to be addictive and to make us stay on tech longer. Using grayscale will make us use our tech less. So I want to challenge this personally to us and also as a family. This has been a huge change for me personally as it's helped me wean off addictive color and the nature of our phones, of the addictive behaviors it gives. Second thing is putting a screen time limit on all social media, video game, and AI functions. This is a need. 8 hours and 39 minutes of screen time must be shifted for students. And the built-in screen time apps kind of stink. And out of the research that is done, the best app that's been out there for protections is this app called Qustidio. And it's Qustidio. And that app would be super helpful for you if you want to search it up and kind of look at, hey, how could we create a family protection system for screens? Next is no phones before 14 and no social media before 16. This is again not an authoritative word from me, but research-based evidence from the largest research project done on the effects of phones called the anxious generation. The findings tell us this, that youth should not have phones before 14. If parents need to communicate, get the kids a flip phone, and you should never have social media before the age of 16. Often you need to actively see how much time you're spending before it truly hits you, and this has been a big game changer. Next is devices are not private until one's done high school. Another thing recommended from Barna Research Company and Andy Crouch's The TechWise family is that any kind of device in a family should be treated like a library computer until one's done high school. And it only worked like this though. If mom and dad had access to their kids' devices, but also mom and dad had access to each other's devices so that the family saw that there was ongoing loving accountability between each other. Super interesting. The next thing that research has recently found is that devices should not be in bathrooms or in bedrooms. These are private spaces that people go to hide on a device if they need to, and it's recommended from Barna Research Company to actually stop doing that. And let me say that a lot of this advice comes from safety. Like I said, for me, some of the worst things that I've gotten into in my life have been on my phone. And here's the point. that protection for our youth, even if they're 16 or 17, like they're an older adolescent, it is so valuable for us as parents. Jonathan Haidt makes this chilling claim that parenthood today is marked by overprotection in the real world, but underprotection in the virtual world. And I want to be clear. When it comes to digital discipleship, I think becoming Amish is not necessarily the answer. Our youth must learn how to access the digital world with real wisdom because we live in a digital age. That's just the truth. But the question that you might have is, how do we approach it then? Especially if in your parenting you might be at a place where, well, my kid already has Instagram or a phone. The research that you're telling me doesn't necessarily line up about what's being done in the family home. What do we do about this? And you need to understand that the number one research, which is good and important, tells us to follow these boundaries. But number two, it is more difficult to backtrack when it becomes about family negotiation and finding middle ground with your students. So if you're in that boat where you're in a place where you have a student who has a device already and you're trying to figure out what do I do about this, here's where you start. You do not pull all the limits on their devices and just go ham on everything that I've just said, but to actually give them understanding about what's happening. So your starting point is this, that tracking your kid's screen time all across all devices is really what you need to do. And when you can track that screen time, just say, hey, this is the amount of time that you're spending on your devices. Did you realize that these were the amount of hours you were putting in? And then start to kind of collaborate and ask, what do we do about this then? If we know that, say, 8 hours and 39 minutes isn't healthy, how do we figure out and go from here together? That's your play if you haven't been able to instill any of those boundaries quite yet. But at the least, research points back to two important things. Number one, to help our youth understand the digital world we're in and model these healthy habits together. And then number two, replace heavy screen time with intentional family time. Here's the thing, what's really interesting about number two in the research is that you can't just take something away from somebody and just kind of leave it empty. You have to actually fill the void. And then intentional family time is one of the spaces that have been found very successful in that space. So, with those two things in mind, let's bring it back here. And there's a lot more to discuss. But what I want to talk about is if you have questions about AI or pornography specifically, serious things that need to be talked about, what you can do is in this YouTube page that you're watching this in right now, you can find the rest of the playlist right here, and you can talk and look at the different videos that were done by both myself and then also Pastor Wes at this church. But before we wrap up, what I want to do is to say this, is despite of what we've talked about, I do not believe that the digital world is inherently evil. You need to understand that. I don't think that the digital world is something that we just need to go completely away from. We need to treat it like a gift. And here's the thing. A gift can be this. Think about a hammer. A hammer is a great gift that we can use to be able to do better construction. But at the same time, when a hammer is not used right, it can deeply wound and hurt us. And I wonder if devices are very similar to that. Another example to treat as a gift is I recently just fixed my 1991 Kenmore dishwasher and I could not figure out how to fix it. And when I looked on YouTube, it was all there. Again, great gift. I found the access on YouTube, but at the same time, some of the worst things that I've done have been on the online world. So what our call is this, is not bans, it's actually more about prohibiting boundaries, or bringing boundaries, that will help us be able to find tech as a good gift from God. And these tools have powerful, powerful uses, but that also means it needs powerful accountability as well. By the way, the best way that I've heard this summarized comes from Andy Crouch, who I quoted earlier, who says, technology is great at serving humans. Humans are not good at being served by technology. So the question that I have for us today is for you specifically, and also for your youth, for your students, is, are you being served by technology, or is technology a tool that you're using? Proverbs 4:23 to close off says this, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. In other words, what you let in regularly will steer your life. And the online world is not neutral, it is forming us. It is forming all people of all generations, but we know because kids are the earliest adopters of technology that they are especially in big risk for it as their mind develops and forms. So I hope that this is helpful. If you would like to get in contact with me to talk about anything about technology, I am more than happy to sit down, have a personal conversation, whether a phone call or a coffee, and I would love to talk about how we can better disciple our students in partnership for the gospel as we partner along together. You can email me at will@ebenezerbaptist.ca, and you can also contact me through this little, in the YouTube link, we have a link in the bio, and all the different information about us is there as well. But I hope this has helped. Share it if it's been helpful, and we really appreciate the time that you've given to watch this today. Bless you as you endeavor in the really difficult but very rewarding task of parenting. And I am praying and I'm partnering with you in this journey for the gospel. And I hope that this evidence-based research that we've been talking about today has been helpful for you. Bless you today.